Thank you very much for joining this lunch discussion. My name is Fyodor Lukyanov. I'm a research director at the Valdai International Club and editor of Russian Global Affairs Journal. And it's a big privilege and honor to all of us to be here. This is really a brilliant conference. I'm attending Raisina for the second time. I see that more and more people come, even almost more than this facility can digest, but this is a technical problem which of course will be solved. For us it's even more, we're delighted to be here because this panel is co-organized by ORF, the organizer of Raisina, and Valdai Discussion Club. We had a discussion with Samir Saran and decided that it would be interesting to join our efforts. To me, initially I was a little bit surprised by the idea of a lunch discussion because I thought that international politics nowadays is one of the worst digestives for any food. But then I decided to look at this problem from the opposite angle, that only beautiful and delicious Indian food can help us to reconcile with what is going on in world affairs. And to make this food even more delicious, we prepared an excellent side dish. So our panel, I hope you will enjoy it. I will present my fellow co-panelists. Cameron Munter is president and CEO of East-West Institute, an old friend and one of the most insightful American commentators. General Evgeny Buzhinsky, after a long career in Russian armed forces, he is now, I would say, the main Russian military expert on broader issues, but in particular strategic stability. Ambassador Yang Yangui is a distinguished Chinese diplomat and which is especially interesting to us, served as ambassador to the European Union. And Indrani Rakchi is diplomatic editor at the Indian Times, so the person who I suppose knows everything about Indian diplomacy and much, much more. So if we would have this discussion approximately 5 years ago, we could still say that something like a world order did exist. Now we cannot say this, and I think that 2018 was in a way another watershed in this deconstruction of international system. We saw a lot of different events, in particular in trade. It was discussed in previous panels as well. I would also stress another, to me, very important development, 2018. I mean, what happened to arms control sphere and strategic stability discussion. A couple of events starting from US withdrawal from Iran deal, the controversy of around INF treaty, and also the famous summit in Singapore between President Trump and President Kim. From different positions, from different angles, undermined the whole philosophy of strategic stability as it was invented 50 or 60 years ago. And now I think we are moving to the new post-arms control world, which will be much different than the previous one, because arms control and strategic stability idea was a centerpiece and core of the whole peace and stability since 1960s. So I hope we can discuss all of this. First of all, I would ask Cameron Munter, who represents the United States, whether we like it or not, but United States is now the country whose impact on international affairs is the biggest one. There is a debate in America whether U.S. now is the main revisionist power or not. It's academic debate. But anyway, we cannot deny that America First philosophy proclaimed by President Trump is not just a slogan. It's also, so to say, a guiding line for the whole world. Because if America is first, then I'm afraid everybody else is forced to be first too. Please, Cameron, can you explain to us and rationalize this America First approach?
Thank you very much. I won't rationalize it because that's probably beyond my capacities. I, too, am a recovering diplomat. So I did work as an American ambassador in countries like Pakistan and Serbia. So I've had some fun assignments, but now my work is at the East-West Institute, and you'll notice that some of my comments have to do with the fact that we work on the process of negotiation and of diplomacy, and that'll color somewhat of what I'm talking about, much more than if I'm representing the government. The main point I hope you will come away from my talk is that Donald Trump did not invent this. This is not a break so much from the past as it is a directional intensification. People like John Bolton, who never met an international treaty that he didn't want to kill, people like John Bolton have been part of the firmament, have been part of the structure in the United States for a very long time. And you'll recall that even when George W. Bush came into power in 2001, one of the first things he did was to take a hard look at the ABM treaty, things like this. So, let's not think that Trump invented a dyspepsia or a resistance to international agreements. He added to it another kind of style, the unpredictability that he has, which is based on his, what you could call the primacy of internal politics, the fact that he is trying to keep people off balance, which in the world of geopolitical stability is just anathema. It's not the way people operate. But again, this is not a question of something that just came yesterday. And the new kind of globalization that we're talking about is one of diffused power. And so, yes, if we are looking for the kind of stability we had in the Cold War where there were two principal actors, this is not going to come back. The question is, how are we going to deal with the diffused element of power? I would add it's not only an element of how states work with each other in a Westphalian system. I'm not here to tell you that I think the Westphalian system is dying or dead, but it is also increasingly not alone. You are still dealing with international agreements, a kind of a polyarchy of agreements, the voluntary ins and outs of agreements that have actors who are not just the traditional state actors, but actors like businesses, actors like nonprofits, actors like universities, or even sub-state actors like civic and other organizations who are going to increasingly be part of questions as we define the kind of stability we want to say on strategic issues. Those voices are going to have to be heard. In addition, not only the players, but the topics are going to be changed. It's no longer reasonable to think of a future of a country like, say, Iraq, and its strategic future without taking into account things like climate change and other kinds of issues that are not in the purview of traditional geopolitical agreements. So that, yes, we still have to deal with nuclear weapons. Yes, we still have to deal with weapons of mass destruction, other kinds of organizations. But there are new definitions that we have to bring into bear. So new players and new definitions mean that the traditional notion of trying to balance things in the form that we had during the Cold War and directly afterwards is not going to work. In this, what we're going to find is a discussion within states about what is the nature of order. And again, I wish I could tell you what will be the nature of order within the American policy-making world. But for the duration of the leadership of Donald Trump, it is going to be very heterodox. It's going to be very different than anything you're used to. It certainly is different than anything I'm used to. It's very difficult to try to say, no, this is not a man who is arbitrary. He's not arbitrary. There is a system. But it's not the system that we were acquainted with in classical international relations theory. It's not a system that you're looking at in trying to avoid the misunderstandings that is the basis of the philosophy of multilateral decisions that we know from the past. A little bit further away. So that what we have now is a tradition in the United States where you are going to have to figure out, yes, there's going to be a critique of multilateral institutions, but at least in the short run, you aren't going to know where they're going to go. So when he pulled out of the JCPOA, you find that there is still not a consensus in the United States about whether that was the right thing to do. And you'll find that there are many people, not only in the political opposition, but in the U.S. military and in other parts of the American body politic, who are supportive of what the Europeans, the Russians, and the Chinese are doing to try to stick by the rules of the JCPOA. You'll find that the threats to leave the INF are striking horror into many of the hearts of, again, many of the American military and many of the American kind of experts in arms control. That is to say, there is no consensus about whether these existing forms and the way that he's dealt with them are correct or not correct. So you have this kind of lack of clarity. But I'll end by saying, do not expect that we will go back to status quo ante after Donald Trump. Because, as I've mentioned, there will be more players and broader definitions of multilateral agreements. And we will not be able to go back to the simplicity that many people found so comforting as recently as 15 or 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When you say that there are new actors and new definitions, it's more or less understandable with actors. When it comes to definitions, that brings me into something like a desperate mood, because about definitions we can argue forever, actually. And in today's world, which is sometimes called a post-truth world, definitions are actually non-existing anymore. So I'm afraid then we have no chance to obtain a regulated rule-based system again. Anyway, when it comes to nuclear arms, it's easy to speculate, and it's easy for us irresponsible experts to say that the arms control is dead. But for those who are in charge of security and strategic stability, it's of course a very big problem, because those arsenals are still with us, while rules how to manage them are eroding or disappearing. So, General Burzynski, you deal with these issues for big part of your life, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Fedor. Yes, it's for me, of course, it's not a pleasant picture today as regards arms control, since I've devoted quite a big part of my military career to negotiating arms control treaties, agreements. And what's happening now, of course, is not very pleasant for me, because traditional arms control, when we speak about arms control, we mainly speak about nuclear arms control, since conventional arms control is limited, to the CFE treaty in Europe and one agreement between Russia, China, and 3 Asian states. But nuclear arms control, of course, is the core of the arms control system. You see, there used to be 3 pillars of the nuclear arms control. That is ABM Treaty of 1972, from which United States unilaterally withdrew in 2001. the INF Treaty of 1987, which is on the verge of collapsing, and I have a feeling that the political decision has already been taken in Washington to leave the treaty under the pretext of Russian violation of the treaty, although Russia has been having concerns about US violations of the treaty, starting from the year 2001. And the latest START, which came into force in 2011, and which I don't think will survive if INF Treaty collapses. So and the consequences of this collapse, of course, may be also the fate of NPT treaty, because NPT without Article 6 is, loses much of its importance and significance, and CTBT. So these three arms control, pure arms control treaties and 2 non-proliferation treaties are at risk of, let's say, of collapsing. What about the future? The future, of course, I don't think that the new negotiations will start immediately after the START treaty will be over in 2021. So some time have to pass. But of course, the future arms control system, if it happens, cannot be, of course, bilateral, only between United States and Russia. There are now at least 4 major nuclear states, that is US, Russia, China, plus India. Then 3 regional players which have nuclear weapons, Israel, Pakistan. North Korea, I have my personal assessment of the situation. I don't think they have nuclear weapons. Yes, they've tested a nuclear device 6 times, but that does not prove that they have nuclear weapons. Because nuclear weapons, technologically, nuclear device is not a nuclear warhead. And they don't have ICBMs. They have missiles at maximum of 3,000 kilometers, which cannot reach even Guam, if we are talking about their targets in the territory of the United States. So about multilateral arms control, I see some obstacles in a way to multilateral arms control. First, to start any arms control negotiations, you've got to have to be confident what the other side has in its disposal. So that's the problem of transparency. United States and Russia, it's an easy case because their stockpiles are declared and verified. UK and French stockpiles are declared but not verified. Chinese stockpile is declared, not verified, and you see, frankly, I do not believe that China, which has been publishing this magic figure of 3,000 warheads for the last 25 years, is actually true. I think they have much more, especially after United States started deployment of global anti-ballistic missile defense in the area that China was just sitting idly. India and Pakistan, no official declaration, no verification, so that's the first problem. Second problem is the traditional position of such states as France, China, to a lesser extent, UK, that first Russia and United States should decrease to the level of their stockpiles, and after that, they are ready to negotiate. And third is the legal in the framework of the NPT, India and Pakistan should be recognized as a nuclear-powered states. And one more about the class of missiles which are covered by the INF Treaty between the United States and Russia. Yes, the treaty, frankly speaking, is not just as regards, first of all, Russian Federation. Because for the United States, yes, to defend their national territory, they do not need to have such class of missiles. For Russian Federation, it's the regional means of deterrence. So there may be, there are some thoughts about how to make this treaty multilateral, to involve, of course, China, India, Pakistan, but the treaty based not on the disposal of the whole class of missiles, but the treaty based on limitations. Let's say each country has in its disposal 200, 300, 500, I don't know. That's the matter of negotiations. And of course, not only ground-based missiles should be included. Air-based and sea-based also must be subject for limitations and negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that, in fact, situation in the area of post-arms control development is even more depressing because, as we discussed before, the general trend is from multilateral to bilateral, and this is what US administration clearly prefers. But in case of arms control, we see from bilateral to unilateral, while what is needed, as General Buzinski mentioned, is just the multilateral system. So it's very much counter-cyclical, and I'm afraid we have no chance to expect it soon. Ambassador, I guess it will be unfair to ask you about Chinese stockpiles. So then I will ask something else. China, and this is universally acknowledged, is the country which benefited most out of the previous international system and globalized economy. Now this system is at least endangered. What China is ready to do to preserve this system, or maybe to amend it in order to adapt to the new international situation?
Thank you. I think the topic in front of us is a serious and heavy one. And I don't claim to have ready answers, but I would like to offer my humble observations. We have been reminded by our host time again to look at general trends in the world and in the region. So I would like to, first of all, touch upon the general trend. We all know that the present international order was founded at the end of the Second World War with the UN system at its center and the UN Charter as its basis. And I think over the past 70 years or so, the purposes and principles enshrined in the UN Charter have been deeply rooted in the hearts and soul of the international community. And adherence to the norms governing international relations have ensured an international order which is stable, relatively speaking, predictable, reliable, and peaceful. And this international order has brought about general peace and prosperity. And we, as a community of nations, have made extraordinary progress particularly the extraordinary progress made by the developing world. And yesterday, the Vice Foreign Minister of Russia mentioned about the emerging seven. I think not only the developing world has achieved political independence, psychologically they have had a revolution. They're more confident in mastering their own destiny, their future, and also they are more committed, to good governments, which can ensure continuous transformation and uplifting of their economies and societies. And economically, they have become, particularly the emerging seven, China, India, and others, have become the main engines for global growth. And as a consequence, I think the global economic pie is getting bigger and bigger. And also, globally, poverty is decreasing, the middle class is increasing, and modern education is spreading. So according to Professor Kishore Mahbubani in one of his books, he says that, to the effect that few sensible people are aware that we live in a world where humanity is standing on the verge of achieving such a utopia. And in objective terms, we have made huge progress. And I think this is not only the success story of China, of India, it is also the success story of the United States, of Europe, of Latin America, Africa. It's a success story of the world, because we all live in the intertwined and interdependent world, and we all live in the world which is secured by such an international order. But having said so, we are fully aware that, particularly over the past year or so, this international order has met with a strong headwind. And there's the resurgence of unilateralism, protectionism, and a retreat from multilateral system and international obligations, including the treaties just now mentioned by our Russian colleague. So we really can't take things for granted. And this international order, it reminds us that this international order needs careful preservation and management. I know there are many reasons behind this resurgence of unilateralism. Probably, I was in the in Brussels for about 4 years. I'm aware of people's anxiety, their concerns, because probably they believe that their developing partners are catching up too fast and they have become too competitive. And they're concerned about the impact of this fundamental change in the world on their way of living and their way of production and so on and so forth. It is understandable. But what worries us the most is the mindset behind this. I'm afraid, we'll have many people from the think tanks. In the Chinese version of the think tanks is quite different. It's quite sophisticated. It means a pool of wisdom. So I think we should not only think hard, but also think wisely. But I'm afraid that there are people in higher places who are advising their leaders on strategic and economic issues that, as I see it, don't carry sufficient common sense, at least. There is the attempt to launch a so-called new Cold War, and there is a so-called attempt to start major power strategic rivalries in the name of so-called 100-year marathon. And there are also attempts to disrupt the global supply chain, to disintegrate the global market, to decouple economies in defiance of all the economic imperatives. And there's also the attempt to keep monopoly of science and technology and to prevent others from achieving excellence in innovation and technological progress. And there are even attempts to raise political obstacles to cultural exchange and exchange between peoples. So I think these attempts are challenging the very outcome of the fruits of our cooperation that we have so painstakingly made together. And also, I think they are putting into the question of the wisdom of win-win cooperation. And I think they are putting at the risks the future of our relations and also the future of the evolving international order. In the words of Prime Minister Modi, are these choices building a more united world or forcing new divisions? With regard to our response, I'll touch upon China later during the second round. But I think, first and foremost, at the time when the global community is faced with increasing global opportunities as well as global challenges, it is high time that we reaffirm the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. And secondly, I think in our efforts to stabilize and strengthen the international order, the key is to have stability and strengthening of relations between major powers. And perhaps the most important would be stability and strengthening of the relations between China and the United States. And this year marks the 40th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and the United States. And it's not only the year that we celebrate, it is also the year that we draw lessons from the past 4 decades. I think one of the lessons is that we all stand to gain from cooperation and we all stand to lose from confrontation. Unfortunately, during their meetings, during the last G20 meeting, a summit, and also during their telephone conversation, as well as the exchange of letters of congratulatory letters on the 40th anniversary of diplomatic relations, President Xi Jinping and President Trump agreed to advance China-US relations centered on coordination, cooperation, and stability. And I think this is a partnership, a relationship that have benefited not only our 2 countries, but the world as well. So we're fully dedicated to enhancing our cooperation. And also, having said that, I think there's also the issue of how we address differences. I think in the first place, we must differentiate what kind of differences we're faced with. On matters concerning sovereignty, territorial integrity, there's no room for compromise. There's a red line there. And on economic and trade issues, China is committed, as always, to engage in serious, substantive, productive, constructive, and result-oriented negotiations and consultations with the United States on the basis of mutual respect and a balanced approach. It has to be good faith for good faith, goodwill for goodwill, and nobody should try to work for an upper hand. And the vice ministerial level on trade disputes is going on. I don't have from the capital about the final outcome, but we do, like the rest of the world, have high hopes. But the thing is, I have to stress here, trade is for mutual benefit, and war is for mutual destruction. And a trade war will destroy trade itself. That certainly is not what we want. And also there is the question of how, oh, excuse me, okay, later on. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, time is running very quickly. Ambassador Young referred to common sense, and of course it's very important. I fully agree with that. Unfortunately, the understanding of common sense is not the same in different cultures and in different countries. So earlier today, President Trump, in his speech to the nation, said that building walls is actually common sense, referring to this situation on the Mexican border. So in this regard, common sense is good, but unfortunately not always common. It's diversified as well. Indrani, what is the Indian common sense?
So in India, every person has their own common sense. I hope you understand that we are a nation of 1 billion common senses. And in a sense, that sort of defines us, because we live in this noisy and chaotic democracy. But looking at the world as it is today, and around the table, I noticed that the kind of apprehension about the disruption that we are currently experiencing in world order, especially in areas of strategic stability, in arms control, in nuclear policies. But I look around, and from the Indian perspective, yes, the old world is probably passing, but for India, is that such a bad thing? And I would submit that the disruption that we are seeing may not be such a bad thing from where we stand. In a sense, India too is a bit of a disruptive power, because we have grown in a manner that may not have been textbook-like. We have retained some elements of the old Westphalian state. We have probably the most robust democracy that you will find. Our decision-making, as I was telling Ambassador Yang a little while ago, is not as ordered as the Chinese. It is much more difficult, much more consultative, but much more chaotic. But when it is done, it is much more of a whole of nation. And we blunder along. We blunder along quite spectacularly. However, we have arrived in a certain sense, and we will arrive in other senses. So what sort of a power would India want to be, and where does India want to find itself in this new world order? I would say we are not unhappy that the superstructure of power that was built on the NPT and built upon by numerous treaties, which in a way defined a world order for the past 50 years, that kept India out, despite the fact that we believed we should be inside. It was a matter of accident, of a particular date, that kept India out of the club. And we have fought for 4 decades to find a foothold in this club. It took it took 2 acts of disruption, of global disruption. 1, the 98 nuclear tests, and 2, 2008 nuclear deal with the US and with the world, for India to actually throw cracks into this particular superstructure so that we could be accommodated. And drawing lessons from that kind of disruption, I would say that we are not terribly unhappy that the INF might die. Because I can see a number of countries that actually should be part of the INF, China for one. China is not part of INF. It's a bilateral agreement. So India should be one part of the treaty. If we are renegotiating for a new world order, if we are renegotiating for new powers to be part of it. So yes, Donald Trump might be unilateralist and disruptive, but he didn't invent unilateralism, did he? When Russia walked into Ukraine, when China took over South China Sea, those were acts of unilateralism. Let us not sing paeans for a world order, for a rules-based order, when China did not accept the UNCLOS decision on the permanent arbitration on South China Sea. That was an act of unilateralism. So yes, I mean, India can say forever that, we followed the rules. When we had a maritime dispute on boundary with Bangladesh, we went to the same PCA, and there was not a murmur from India when we had to concede over 20,000 square kilometers of our EEZ to Bangladesh. But I did not see the whole world standing up and giving us a standing ovation. We did stand by the rules-based order. We followed those rules. So, in a sense, when we are growing for the world to make space for a power like India, I think a degree of disruption is not such a bad thing. The question is, how do we deal with the disruption? Do we make smart choices? Do we make stupid choices? I suspect as India, we will make both. We will make some smart choices and many stupid choices. But that's just the nature of the power that we are. What would be our main determinants of power as we grow forward? Certainly, the new concept of Indo-Pacific is in many ways designed for an Indian power, for giving India larger space in designing a new world order. I know the word Indo-Pacific does not have currency in certain parts of the world, certainly in China, certainly in Russia. But these are our strategic spaces. And for many, many years, for many decades, these spaces were shut out to India, despite them being our natural strategic backyards. As we grow, we will reclaim a lot of these strategic spaces. We would probably not do it by ourselves. We would do it with other partnerships and partnerships that work for us. So yes, we would have a quad, we would have trilaterals, we would have small partnerships. But these are spaces that we will be a part of, that we will want to be say a net security provider, not only in the Indian Ocean, but in the Western Pacific, in the off the Red Sea, in the Straits of Hormuz. These are our strategic spaces, and that is where you will see Indian power more and more active in the coming years. I will stop here and we'll take questions later.
Thank you very much for this very...
Oh, I'm so...
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for this short but very clear and very frank statement, actually, because I think it's very important to nowadays to identify interests and perceptions, because many of us stick to mantras about the order which should be preserved, But of course, any order is not universally beneficial, and there are always countries which believe that some changes are to their benefit. So thank you. I was stupid enough at the beginning not to introduce Anton Tsvetov. I'm sorry very much. Anton is advisor to chairman of Center of Strategic Research, one of the most prominent and most important think tanks in Russia. And it's very good that he speaks after Indrani Bakhchi, because Anton was one of the first experts in Moscow who started to write and to elaborate about in the Pacific concept. And by the way, Valdai Club issued a report last year about this, which you can find on our website. So Anton, please.
Thank you. Yeah, well, since the Indo-Pacific was mentioned, I'll take the liberty to talk about that, though a lot of great stuff has been said about the world order, and I would really like to maybe return to that in the second round if we can afford ourselves that. But since Indrani mentioned the Indo-Pacific, and I'd like to say what I think how it regards and reflects the topics that we have been discussing today about the global politics. If we look at some of the mega regional, how they are sometimes called, initiatives, and I of course mean first and foremost the Belt and Road Initiative, now the various Indo-Pacific strategies, two of them, right? The Indo-Pacific as a denomination of a region, and I feel that I have to mention Russia's own concept of the Greater Eurasian Partnership. You'll find that it's difficult to call these initiatives regional. The One Belt, One Road encompasses the Arctic, it encompasses most of the world, actually. The Great Eurasian Partnership also has been mentioned a couple of times that the Russian leadership deems, for example, interaction between the Eurasian Union and Mercosur as a part of the Great Eurasian Partnership. So that spans quite far away outside of the Eurasian continent. And of course, the Indo-Pacific encompasses a huge region, and probably the only concept that involves Africa. Though of course the Belt and Road is deep, finds its way deep into the African continent as well. And I think what it tells us is this is definitely a new mode of globalization, which is at the same time seen as led by smaller groupings of countries, unlike the initial and the previous model of globalization, when we were hoping that there would be a certain globally democratic procedure and institution for managing that type of globalization. It seems that is no longer doable, and that it is easier for countries to see themselves as leaders of a smaller and perhaps not as deep, but maybe a more functional model of globalization in the form of a mega-regional initiative. And the strategy and the toolkit is that you gather a group of willing countries, and you decide on issues that you would all like to work on. You pick those issues that are non-controversial, at least to your like-minded states, as the current American administration likes to say. Like-minded is a new buzzword over there. And you proceed where you can proceed. If we would like to try and find an analogy for this, it would be a globalization of the willing, right? Because there's apparently those actors that are not willing to proceed with the globalization as it used to do, and those who are seeking new models. Now, and to tie that up a little bit with what had been said previously about the reordering of the world, is that I think that most of this is a reaction to when states faced the complexity of contemporary international life. I'm saying this to encompass both the international society, the international politics, economics, culture as well, and values. And I think that the slogan of taking back control is very much applicable today to states as well, because power is not being diffused just between states and from state to non-state actors. It is also diffusing into thin air as states face realities where they can no longer control things they used to be confident in controlling. And this sense of losing control is what's breeding a lot of the pushback against the previous model of globalization towards more contemporary models of globalization. And this is why I think that in the coming years we will see countries, particularly those in the middle tier, searching for new forms of autonomy. And that means that they will seek non-exclusive commitments. I think that the idea of non-alignment will be getting more and more traction in the coming decades, as it appears to be one of the few conceptual alternatives to what is being offered by most great powers. I think I've been speaking for too long, so I suggest we go to the questions, but I think that this is how we're going to see things operate in the near future, and those countries who do not demand exclusivity from their partners will be the most successful in furthering their agenda globally, and proposing less ambitious forms of globalization, which does not mean that globalization is slowing down. I think that as a result, as an emergent phenomenon, we may see even more levels of globalization that we have seen, but they will not be a result of a global endeavor, but more likely an added result of smaller globalizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's a great term, globalization of the willing. I think we can also add to discussion globalization of the unwilling, because there are countries, in particular those who nowadays love walls, they seem to be quite interested in a different kind of development. Anyway, unfortunately, we have only 10 minutes left, as I was informed by organizers. So if we provoke some questions, so we are ready and eager to take them. Is there any? Please. And please say to whom the question goes.
Thank you so much. Just following your, Mr. Fedor Lukyanov, your comments, and Mr. Munter, Cameron, you're talking about the definitions. As far as I understood, we're talking today about multilateral order, new order. New order, it's like a new space. And here, I think we should go even much deeper, not only definitions, but the concepts. What are the concepts of space? And I think Ms. Indrani Bakshi today replied us that this, the changing concept of space for each rising powers like India or China or Russia. So in this regard, I would like to ask you, Indrani, thank you very much for your detailed elaboration on Indo-Pacific. As far as I understood, Indo-Pacific is a new conceptual space or definition of the India regarding its own global ambitions, not only regional, and what could be the mechanisms of this new space? Like, we know about this Asia-Africa corridor. Like, for example, it also implies the participation of Japan and also as far as and West Africa. Whether it has could have some continuations in the form of like going further to Americas, or that will more focused around, as you mentioned, in Indian Ocean, Bay of Hormuz, Red Sea, and that is based on the traditional civilizational so-called impact which India had, whether it comes to Southeast Asia of Hinduism or Buddhism. And in this regard, what part of Central Asia could be, because I am from Central Asia, from Kazakhstan, that could be in the concept of this new space? Like, we know about extended neighborhood program of India and the Link Central Asia program. But as far as I know, since 2030, it's like a sort of declaration only, rather than maybe a more active participation involvement. So what kind of other arteries or roles of that could be? Thank you.
The question is clear. We collect, I see here and there. I'm afraid that's all we can take.
I'm David Loyne from King's College London. Thank you very much. the ambassador said that she would speak about China in the second round, and I want to make sure that she's given that opportunity.
Please, yeah.
Thank you to the panel for your contributions. I have a question about Central Asia. This is the new contested area, and we see Russia having one view and China having another. On the surface, it looks like everything's going so well, but there's a lot of questions about how this, it seems that China brings the money and Russia brings the security, but that seems to be changing now with China's kind of growing security issues there, and especially now with Afghanistan. So maybe members of the panel can comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert Zukhaniev, Peer Center. My question is to Ms. Androni Bakchi. You mentioned good idea of in China and India join INF or INF talks or kind of this. Can you elaborate this idea? Is it just your idea or there is kind of discussion in India about this or about some kind of arms control prospects in this region? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Very briefly, a question to Anton and to Indriani. The multilateral order that was created in the post-war clearly has a lot of problems, and it's very dysfunctional. It's exclusive. It's unfair. But if it disappears, we will suffer in many ways. I mean, we should be careful not to throw the baby out with the tap water. That's my, and just on two terms. One is from a functional perspective, what you call the globalization of the willing is actually another term for form shifting, which leads to increasing fragmentation, institutional fragmentation, and that takes a toll on efficiency. We pay a price on efficiency. And in terms of power, it means that we as developing countries have to face, for instance, the US or China or whoever on bilateral basis, instead of, for instance, on a framework such as the WTO, which with all its problems has rules and makes technical decisions. So yeah, I'd just like to make those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more questions. Please, we start with Ambassador Yang. Be very short, because otherwise we'll be thrown out from here.
I try. I think in the first place, China's strategic priority and focus is consistent and clear. That is to continue to meet its people's growing aspiration for a better life. And we in China say, as heaven maintains its vigor through movement, a gentleman should constantly strive for self-perfection. And late Chairman Mao Zedong said that the greatest contribution that China can make to the world is its own peace, prosperity, and progress. And I think between China and the United States, I think the real competition is not so much in the international affairs. I think it is in how we do our own homework well. It lies in restructuring, reform, and good governance. If we do a good job, nobody can change us. And if we fail, nobody can help us. And secondly, we believe a man of virtue, while establishing himself and pursuing success, also works to establish others and enable them to succeed as well. So we're committed to good neighborliness, cooperation, and also cooperation with the rest of the world. And thirdly, Chinese culture is featured by harmony, flexibility, open-mindedness, inclusiveness, and tolerance. And China has a very open attitude towards competition and cooperation. We believe competition rather than protectionism can make oneself competitive. So, we just like between yin and yang, you need always to strike the right balance. And competition and cooperation are not mutually exclusive. So we have an open mind to competition and cooperation. And also, people always mention about this is a trap. I think to avoid the trap, the way is to open a new path. Why can't we do that? I think we should, and what happened in Europe in the past is not inevitable in today's world, particularly between China and the United States. I don't believe in that. And also, we should be always ready to learn from others. Chinese culture is really very good at learning. We have a value, for instance, we have long-term view of things, and we take things in moderation, whereas the United States is very strong in innovation, in its energy, and we do not underestimate that. So if we can bring the best of the two, we can contribute further to the rest of the world. And finally, I think at the end of the day, the future of mankind very much depends on the choices that we make today. It depends on what kind of mindset we have. And if we have a negative mindset, which is obsessed with a Cold War zero-sum game approach, we'll see traps and conspiracies everywhere. And we will be suspicious and fearful of even new ideas like Belt and Road Initiative, and for no good reasons whatsoever, they could make other people's dream their own nightmare. But if we have a positive mindset, we will really see the realities of the times, and we will seize opportunities, and we'll turn challenges into opportunities. So I think at the end of the day, we'll all be better off by MAP, mutually assured prosperity, and not by MAD, mutually assured destruction. Thank you.
Central Asia as well. Yes. So Central Asia clearly is not part of Indo-Pacific. It is part of a different part of India's diplomacy. We are hampered by the presence of the Hindu Kush and the Himalayas in between. So access is a bit of an issue, and that has been one of the constraining factors for India's outreach to Central Asia, despite an old historical relationship. I suspect we will find a way around geography, but for that we'll have to wait for the INSTC to grow. On the INF, if governments around the world only listened to us journalists, the world would be such a good place, but governments don't. As far as the INF, no, I was just putting the thought out that if you're dismantling INF, look at the countries that really should be in the INF, that should be part of a discussion on a treaty such as the INF. Regarding your point, and I do agree that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And in fact, I think the point that Indian strategists make is that we don't want to tear apart the world order. We want the world to make space for India. And that does not mean, you look at, as you rightly said, the WTO, in fact, is probably the best sort of example of a regulated globalization because of its dispute settlement system. And but if you look at WTO today, please tell me, where are the judges? Because the US Congress is not allowing judges to be nominated to the WTO. So there is a deliberate degrading of global bodies like the WTO, but it isn't because of us. It is, if you had more of us around, you would probably not have a system where one country, in this case the US, takes the decisions that it does to undermine an organization like the WTO. So multilateralism is certainly part of an integral part of how India sees itself in the world. And whether it is a belief in the UN system which itself has been undermined over the years, or whether it is in terms of the minilaterals and the quadrilaterals and the trilaterals that George Bush used to call it the coalition of the willing before invading Iraq. We hope that the context would change, but coalitions of the willing are not such a bad thing, I think. Thank you.
General Burzynski, very briefly on Afghanistan, if you can respond to the question about future of Afghanistan and security.
Excuse me. It was not about the Afghanistan security, but Central Asia security, or was it about Afghanistan? Both. Well, about Afghanistan security, of course, it's an extremely difficult question, because you see the prospects are not, in my assessment, is not very optimistic, since I'm not sure that the United States will withdraw from Afghanistan completely. At least all the statements by the US president are quite contradictory. The president tweets one thing, the Minister of Defense declares another. But if they leave, of course, Taliban is going to prevail, and that will be the actually the next round of the Afghan drama. I have no recipe. What's definite that Russia is not going to interfere militarily there. We had that experience and lessons learned. As for the Central Asia, I do not agree that China provides money and Russia provides security. Russia also provides quite a lot of money, writing off billions of debts of our former Soviet republics. Moreover, even now, as for Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan is quite another story, since Kazakhstan is quite prosperous as it is, but such countries as Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, they need quite a lot of, yes, of course, they receive a lot of Chinese financial and material help, but Russia is not in the backyard of the process. We also provide security and financial and material help. Thank you.
Okay, my takeaway from today's lunch discussion is that the previous order, which was at the end of the day based on mutually assured destruction, is over. So arms control is more or less dead, but now we know what to do. We need maybe multilateral negotiations on MAP, so mutually assured prosperity, and it seems that these negotiations can take as long, many decades, as the previous model of mutually assured destruction negotiations. So all of us will have a lot to do in years and decades to come. Thank you very much.